What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Cordy Boy, here on episode 5 of Toolkit, talking about oxygen and pressurization requirements. Oxygen and pressurization are critical for enabling high-altitude flying operations. As we move higher and higher in altitude, the air gets thinner and it becomes more difficult to breathe or perform physical activities due to the lack of oxygen. At 20,000 feet, without supplemental oxygen or pressurization, the time of useful consciousness is measured in minutes. Above 30,000 feet, that time can be measured in seconds. When put into a stressful situation, such as an in-flight emergency, aerial combat, or sensitive military operation, pilots begin to breathe heavier and their oxygen demands increase. As a result, pilots' time of useful consciousness can drastically decrease even from those numbers. Because of this, many aircraft are built with some form of cabin pressurization system. These systems keep the interior air pressure equivalent to that of a lower altitude. In addition to that, many aircraft are equipped with some form of supplemental oxygen system. These systems can come in many forms. Some systems are purely canisters of compressed oxygen, while others concentrate oxygen out of the ambient air to provide to the pilot. For obvious reasons, it is absolutely critical that every pilot understands the oxygen system and pressurization requirements set forth by their unit or organization when conducting flying operations at high altitudes. The Air Force Manual 11-202, Volume 3 lays out the following oxygen and pressurization requirements. When it comes to pressurization, Air Force pilots must be aware of 4 key numbers. These numbers are 10,000 feet, 13,000 feet, 18,000 feet, and 25,000 feet. First of all, the Air Force directs that all pilots will maintain a cabin pressure altitude below 10,000 feet. If the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 10,000 feet, all aircrew will use supplemental oxygen. In the event of an inadvertent cabin pressure loss, if any aircrew is found to have malfunctioning oxygen equipment, the pilot must initiate a descent below 13,000 feet MSL or less, fuel or terrain permitting. If cabin altitude exceeds 18,000 feet, following the unintended loss of cabin pressure, all aircrew and passengers must be evaluated by a flight surgeon or other aviation medical authority prior to further flight. Otherwise, with properly functioning oxygen equipment, pilots should descend below 18,000 feet cabin pressure altitude if at all possible. Otherwise, unless occupants are wearing functional pressure suits, under no circumstance should the pilot allow the cabin pressurization altitude to exceed flight level 250. When flying an unpressurized aircraft, things get a little more complicated. If there are any passengers that have not received aerospace physiological training, the pilot cannot exceed 13,000 feet or exceed 3 hours above 10,000 feet in an unpressurized aircraft. Assuming all aircrew has received aerospace physiological training, the following restrictions apply. Without supplemental oxygen available, aircraft that are unpressurized cannot exceed 14,000 feet MSL. They cannot exceed an hour between 10,000 feet MSL and 12,500 feet MSL if any portion of the flight is conducted in IMC at night while employing weapons, airdrop, air refueling, or if performing high-G maneuvers. Otherwise, the aircraft cannot exceed 30 minutes between 12,500 and 14,000 feet MSL. All occupants must be using supplemental oxygen if exceeding 14,000 feet MSL. At this point, the pilot can go up to flight level 250, but not above it unless all occupants have access to a functional pressure suit. Regardless of aircraft pressurization, if any occupant exhibits decompression sickness symptoms, descend as soon as practical and land at the nearest suitable installation where medical assistance can be obtained. Anybody suspected of decompression sickness shall be administered and remain on 100% oxygen until evaluated by aviation medical authority. If required to fly unpressurized at certain altitudes, the following chart details the amount of time that can be spent at each altitude in order to prevent decompression sickness. Now that we've discussed all the regulations pertaining to cabin pressurization and decompression sickness, let's talk about the oxygen system. This table details the oxygen requirements for pressurized aircraft according to aircraft altitude. Note that this should not be confused with cabin pressure altitude, but the physical altitude that the aircraft is at. In the table, the letter A denotes oxygen available. By definition, this means that you have a requirement to carry or place portable oxygen units or extra oxygen outlets with masks throughout the cabin or cargo area so that any person has quick access to oxygen should a loss of pressurization occur. R means that oxygen should be readily available. By definition, this means a functioning system and mask should be located within arm's reach, and a regulator must be set to 100% and on when the regulator is adjustable. I means that oxygen must be immediately available. The definition for that is that you must wear your helmet with an oxygen mask attached to one side, or have an available approved quick don style mask properly adjusted and positioned. Set regulators to 100% and on. O means the oxygen mask must be on. The regulator must also be on and set to normal. G means that you must be wearing your partial pressure suit. And S means that you must wear a full pressure suit. If your body's oxygen needs aren't being met, you'll encounter what's called hypoxia. Some symptoms of hypoxia include confusion, euphoria, headache, shortness of breath, lack of coordination, and even dizziness. If anybody on the aircraft experiences hypoxia symptoms, descend immediately to the lowest practical altitude and land at a suitable location to obtain medical assistance. Aircrew will not fly after a hypoxia event unless specifically authorized by a flight surgeon. And there you go. You now know everything about Air Force oxygen and pressurization requirements. As a disclaimer, this video was specifically intended for Air Force pilots and references the Air Force Manual 11-202 Volume 3, dated 10 June 2020, specifically Chapter 3, Subsection 21, which is the oxygen and pressurization requirements. Please be sure to share this content with anybody that you think needs it, and leave a comment, give me some ideas on what you think I should cover next. Until next time, see ya!
I think he's about to die. No, I'm still going. That was doing pretty good. Yeah. He's getting confused. Sad man, sit up there.